Welcome everyone. Just going to talk about a few things today. I've pretty much done with the tuning. I've just got to apply some files that I captured or after my initial application of the recall. Now the big thing with these files today is that I adjusted the calibration offset for the electronic throttle valve. So the recall position was different to what Woolwich, well, it's still different to what Woolwich had, but it's different to what my original bike had. And it's one of the differences with the ETV calculation for the logged data. That's one of the big things impacted by the recall because that data comes from the sensor. That's the value that is actually applied at the throttle bodies. So decoding that by Woolwich to figure out which cell to put the AFR value in is a big deal. Now, the formula that Woolwich have, now I've got the formulas here. So we have the formula that Woolwich has. Let's see. So we have, no, this was my old one. We have the new correct one. We have the new Woolwich one. So Woolwich, when they decoded the original bike, all right, they had the lowest point in their electronic throttle valve values coming from the OBD port, all right, which is what it is. So you can plug any logger in that you can get an adapter for. Was the lowest point was 38 and the scale was 1.66. Now my original one was 32, so it had a more significant difference, and of course the 1.78 is just whatever it takes to get from 32 up to the top of the range to 100%, the maximum value there. Now after the recall, where they are supposed to be, there's been a few people they screwed it up on, just noticing from Reddit threads and Facebook threads and whatnot. Mine came back at 34, so a bit closer, but still a long way from what Woolwich is using. Yeah, Woolwich isn't out of the woods with respect to the formula they're using. And of course, now people are like, well, my tune's different and whatnot. If they actually had one that was calibrated and it was closer to 38 on their bike, then, and it depends on what the tuner was using, what bike the tuner was tuning on. So if the bike the tuner was tuning on was closer to this, then all of the AFR values on the ETV map would be closer to where they should be. So what I'm talking about here is that's the IAP map. We're talking about this. So it's the ETV map. So when you are working out your tune, the consequence of this formula here versus this one here, so my bike was this and recording with this, well, anything below 38 would end up, and obviously there's four different values, whole number values, and they would end up in the wrong cells. So a value from say here, an AFR value recorded for 3.6 would end up here, and an AFR value recorded for this column would end up here. And so that meant that these low throttle openings, right, would be being tuned based upon AFR that was actually recorded based upon these inputs. And you can see the significant difference in inputs here. You know, that's a significant amount of extra fuel going in. And because these are tinted red, you can see it's actually being reduced from stock. And it's being tuned into these cells here. And that's what's giving people sort of that. Actually, technically, we want to be looking down here because a lot of people are complaining about idle. All right, and yeah, if you're tuning these values here into here, then you're going to get some issues. And the secondary issue is that the IAP values are going to be messed up in this area as well. So they're not going to match up. Technically, these columns don't match up with these columns. Is somewhat in reverse. So the IAP equivalent for closed throttle, depending upon your engine braking level, is down in here. So we're talking this area. So these are the bits that need to overlap. So, you know, to get a good tune where there's a good sort of balance, the tuner has to, they can't just run it on the dyno like some of them do and then call it done. They have to actually come into this map. they have to look at the logs and the various IAP values that are associated with this say this particular TPS value, or at least more the closed throttle ones, and they need to come into the IAP and they need to find from the logs where those cells overlap, and they need to update these. But anyway, I've just talked about multiple things, but the best benefit of the recall potentially is that anyone whose bikes are a bit further away, like mine is, all right, to what Woolwich has, might now be closer, and that's going to make your tune a bit more applicable. And that's hoping that the tuner that's doing your tune, if they've got their starting point like they should have, is either they did it on a bike that was closer to this, then they'll have less issues. So that was a benefit with my recall and the recalibration of the TPS sensor. Don't know why they call it a TPS sensor, because it is on the electronic throttle valve, but then it is a throttle. It's more like a throttle body sensor because that's what it's on. Whereas your actual twisty throttle's up on your hand. God knows what they call that one. Anyway, that's calibratable. This is now readjusted, and I'm ready to reapply that. I modified the software to recalculate it again. So now it's just a case of applying those, and we'll see how we go. So I have been helping someone with their Kawasaki ZX10. I think it's a couple of years old, but still effectively the current gen. I think 6th gen. Yeah, in helping them, of course, I want to do what I do, which is to go through the log file and have a look at what's actually happening, what the sort of peaks are, and that. And yeah, I can't load their file in the data viewer. I tried unlike where I could load the R1 file for the MT09, there must be a common Yamaha thing, but the Kawasaki, it just didn't, it was a very different file. And I was able to actually decode most of it blind, but I got quite lucky because there was something else that cropped up in the data viewer, and I'll just divert back to that. And I don't know why this screen is looking terrible. Okay, it's resized itself. Woolwich, of course, push out updates like we push out crap. Uh, yeah, there's an update every day, every second day, pretty much. But if I come back to the data viewer, they have this. So if I open a log file, we put this one here. Okay, they have this now, export to XML. Now, I presume that this is because you use the logger and you want to tie it up with, say, a camera thing or some other telemetry systems that you might have on your bike. A bit like my Racebox thing that I've got. So like GPS and all that sort of stuff. So that actually makes sense. And yeah, I didn't. To me, it was new. So I was quite a surprise to see it, and yeah, there's a lot of data in it, so pretty much anything that they decode. So yeah, if you want to get your data out, that XML file is handy. You can sit there with a bit of copy and paste and remove the XML tags and turn them into CSV and then load it into Excel rather than use my decoder. But my decoder now does the Kawasaki ZX10 if you need that. Oh, I haven't pushed it up to GitHub, so it doesn't yet. Anyway, talked enough through this. Oops, that was not a smart thing to do. Okay, let's try this again. So we have this, we have autotune, we have the log files, we have the converted ones because I apply the filtering to remove a whole lot of stuff I don't want in it. Now I do my usual, which is I look at these ones here, and yeah, it is running a bit richer. I have found, so we're on TPS maps. So yeah, what's my target AFRs? 14s. 13.5. Yeah, so it's calling it a lot richer. And these are adjusted now. So I did up the data count. Okay, let's check the settings again, because of course Woolwich loves to wipe the settings. Maximum cell data logs is 6, and so it's saying, okay, what's going on there? IAP is high, AFR 16 RPM, TPS electronic throttle valve. So this is closed throttle. So that's engine braking. Shouldn't have a huge issue. Okay, I'm going to let that one do its thing. These ones, yeah, I'm not going to let it do anything because I don't have enough data. Not comfortable with that, but I'll check them again later. Okay, so that was what was logged. So this was too low, these were too rich. All of this stuff is just the core of it, and none of these are particularly excessively rich. This is all meant to be like 13.5, so it's pretty much where it's all meant to be. It's just saying that this area is richer than it should be, and I actually agree with that, because I've found after the recall that the fuel's running a bit rich, so I'm actually gonna let this one go. Okay, and it's gonna lean it out here. Yeah. Now this one I'm not sure about, and there's a couple of dips here, so I'll have to go back and tune them out. 96.15. Actually, might not be bad, because that's the original, and there's a dip there. Why is there a dip there? There shouldn't be a dip there, because I go and take all of them out. Or did I miss one? Where are we? 8,000 at 12%. Okay. And I can't zoom. Great. The mouse wheel isn't working. Thank you, Woolwich. Okay, 8,000 at 6, 10. Let's apply it. We'll see what we get. Okay, let's go to IAP. Oh, so one of the things that came up, if you haven't switched off already, uh, is when you're starting out, do small runs, small data runs. The factory maps, the default maps, they do rely on the O2 sensor feedback loop to tune, and that will happen instantly. So you're never really running on the factory maps for a very long period of time. So when you start this process with the auto tune and your Zotronics logger, and you set it up, you turn off the D-cell fuel cut, and you go for your first ride. The first that needs to be as short a ride as possible, and when you do ride, you do want to try and get a good range of throttle positions that you can get away with. The bigger the bike, the harder it is, because of course you try and get 100% throttle somewhere, and yeah, you're over the speed limit in a second, depending upon where you are. But do try and keep the first run short, because that's the highest risk. If those fuel maps the default fuel maps are really lean, then you're going to be running around with a lean bike, and you don't want to be doing that. So you want to get out, get a good collection of data quickly, get back, run it through the software, apply it, and at least that gets you out doing the bulk of your collection on a bike that's already partial, like had those lean spots removed. So what we're going to do is just going to compare on the graph. There's nothing really fancy on these ones. Okay, and it's not showing anything. Okay, so there's nothing dramatic there, which is kind of what I was expecting. So now that we've done that, and I closed this before and the whole thing closed, not this time. Okay, so got to come over to here. Wow, they're having fun with their zooms. So I can't see anything particularly nasty in here, so I'm not too worried about that. Now, what have we got here? Actually doesn't look too bad. Maybe here, this one's still here. This peak is still sitting here. It didn't really mess this up like it has previously, so I'm okay with that. I can tolerate that, so I'm actually going to leave it as is. I'm not going to modify it. Now, another thing I want to talk about, and this is something that always bugs me, because you know the tuners, they've got to sell tunes. That's their job. But it's the way they sell tunes, and one of the great ones is this. So this is someone everyone knows about, and he's talking here about second gear and this huge, well, restriction. But the reality is, it's like you can't use that. That's 100% throttle, around 5,500, going from, you know, 3.5, so sort of a cruising thing up to here. You can have, maybe you might want some of it, but this area here, this is rolling on the throttle coming out of a corner. Now, if you're just straight lining it because you live somewhere and the only thing you have are dead straight roads and you have chicken strips that are 1.5 inches wide on each side, then okay, this might suit you. And hey, let's be honest, I did my drag strip, my drag racing one, where I just shot it up to 100% throttle from 50% at the wrist, uh, and basically programmed it to give the bike everything it could but still keep it under control. You know, that's where you could maybe play with that, and I did that on mode 3. But seriously, guys, he's doing this to sell tunes. Hey, look at your throttle restrictions. And I found on Reddit, people are just lapping it up. It's like, but when I'm on the twisties, this section here, this is me coming out of a corner. So I've rolled into a corner, apexed it, I'm off the brakes, I'm onto the, starting to roll on the throttle, the bike's starting to stand up. The last thing I want is this thing dumping an extra 20 horsepower into my rear wheel. I mean, I've just had a high side from spinning up the back due to dumping too much power into the back wheel, and I know that the TPS takes a second before it kicks in, and you can end up really crossed up in that second. It happens so fast, and of course, when the traction control finally kicks in, this extra 20 horsepower is going to be spitting you into the air, and you're coming down hard. So yeah, I think these guys, yes, it sells tunes, but it's not necessarily the most responsible thing to be doing. And yeah, if you're just some sort of avenue cruiser or whatever, riding on straight roads and doesn't really get into the twisties, it's probably not an issue. You're probably going to really enjoy this. But yeah, a lot of people are like, well, I must have this tune, I must have these dead spots and restrictions removed. But at the end of the day, you might actually not want to. So yeah, just thought I'd mention it. And you know, the issue is, it's like, well, yeah, if you do want it, that's great. But, you know, I sit there and I look at, well, where in the rev range am I? Where am I in second gear when I'm in these throttle positions, when I'm in these RPM ranges? What am I actually doing on the road? And more often than not, I'm coming out of a corner. If I particularly want that straight line acceleration at that point, well, I'm going to kick it down. I'm going to be in the right gear. And of course, so I'm going to be in first, I'm going to be revving a bit higher, and I will just go boom and then kick it up into second, and it will bring me up into second quite a bit higher. All right. And no dead spot. So, yeah, I think these guys selling tunes need to be a little more. Well, then they're trying to sell tunes, so they don't give a shit. But the poor bugger that ends up flying through the air because of it, well, it's a whole different thing. So anyway, that's my other mini rant for the day. But I'm pretty much done here. I was happy with that. This is post recall. I applied the initial post recall one. I actually noticed that it was running a bit richer. So I think 15 weeks from my accident, broken collarbone, broken thumb, and yeah, getting back on. I've been back on the bike since about week 10. Just doing some casual rides. Or actually casual rides. I did a 500 kilometre ride through one of the better roads, Putty Road in Sydney, but I was sort of taking that easy. Instead of sort of being up at the front of the group, I was sort of sitting back to the back, um, just while I eased into it, and yeah, get back into it. And I do find that the bike is good physiotherapy. I just find now day to day, there isn't much I do regularly that really gives the thumb or the shoulder a workout that it needs. And I hate just doing static exercises. So, um, yeah, getting there. The bike's all patched back together. It's in the matte black fuel tank, which I really like the look of, and the air scoops. I haven't done the decals. I'm trying to find something I like, and I'm trying to find something custom. So we'll have to see how that goes. If you want help, and I see people help, I'm quite willing to talk. Like, I'm not an expert. I'm just some mug, knows software, knows how these things get programmed. All right, who sits there and thinks about things. So I don't just, I've got some twit on YouTube trying to sell tunes saying, hey, you need to get rid of this dead spot. And I actually go, hang on, but what am I doing on the bike in that point in time? You know, what am I doing with this data? Is the data correct? Am I tuning the right cell, whatnot? What are the consequences of just hooking up the Zytronic stuff, turning off the O2 sensor feedback loop, and going for a 400 kilometer day ride? It's like, well, I'm riding on God knows what tune, what maps on the bike. I could be running it at 20 AFR lean through the entire map. Not a good situation. So, these are things I like to sort of I like to ask the what ifs. What are the consequences? What are the things I should be considering? Except the one time I didn't, which is, should I be consider being out here on this wet track on these really bad street tires that aren't heating up? But anyway, yeah, if people want to talk to me, want to contact me, you know, an email address is sitting on the screen at almost all times while I've got the Woolwich software up. So feel free to email that, and happy to chat, and we can talk about it. I can't sit there and get hands on with your bike, but at least I can help you in finding places to look at your data and see where things are. It's a hell of a lot easier to search for an AFR 20, or and then go, oh crap, we need to look for an air leak, than it is to for you to just apply it to auto tune and wonder why the tune you've just written to your bike is all over the place. So things to consider. If you want to contact me, do, and yeah, good luck with everything.